I really think that we cannot continue accepting the standard lab ranges, which are being used as guidelines for preventing disease, because they are not at all useful. There are way more accurate, more dynamic ways for helping us understand what our unique biology needs than the standard ranges. And there are many studies that have been shown already that these are not optimal ranges, not for men, not for women. I would say ask better questions, learn more, demand more from your care practitioners. Don't accept the status quo. That's my message to everyone, whether that's going to be technology like ours or someone else's. Do more testing. Or we have a number of companies pioneering more testing and more affordable, right?
The human body is a dynamic system, but conventional medicine treats it like a collection of isolated parts. For Dr. Elena Ikonomovska, the reductionist frame led to years of dismissal despite her body sounding the alarm. She refused to accept the status quo, turning her AI expertise from tech giants like Google and Reddit onto the most complex system of all, herself. Today, she reveals the hidden truth that even normal lab ranges conceal systemic disease, especially in women. Join us as she cracks the code on systems biology, exposing the patterns that finally make sense of symptoms, and launching Diadia Health to scale precision, prediction, and personalized healing. Dr. Elena Ikonomovska is a machine learning scientist and the co-founder and CEO of Diadia Health, a precision health company reimagining women's health through systems biology and data intelligence. With a PhD in artificial intelligence, Elena built algorithms that powered decision systems at Google, Reddit, and Change.org before turning her attention to the human body as the most complex system of all. At Diadia, she and her team are decoding the dynamic interplay between hormones, immunity, and metabolism, conditions often misdiagnosed or misunderstood through a reductionist frame of medicine. By uniting data science with empathy, Elena's work reveals new pathways toward understanding resilience, repair, and regulation in women's health. Her story embodies the ethos of the DNA of things, where technology meets tenderness, where biology becomes narrative, and where the drive to understand life becomes the most human endeavor of all. Welcome to the show, Dr. Elena Ikonomovska. I swear to gosh, I'm going to get that right before the end of this conversation.
That's okay. Thank you, Jeremy. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're doing some pretty amazing things. I think, one of the things that really, called to my mind, obviously, is the amazing holistic nature of, a whole systems approach that you're bringing to help usher in, I would say, the age of scientific wellness, really. I was talking to actually Dr. Lee Hood a few episodes ago, the godfather of systems biology, if you were, and, really this pioneer presented the idea, but now here I am at the tip of the spear where it's actually happening, through people like you, through companies like yours. And so that called to my mind and body, if you will. But then it also called to my heart, because I thought, gosh, if something like this existed for my mother and her diagnostic odyssey, and then eventual diagnosis and tragic end with multiple sclerosis, wow, how different things might be. And while that's tragic, I think where we stand today is, well, I'm quite optimistic, and insofar as seeing the industry evolve, and recently in our conversation. So I really want to take a moment and give the listeners appreciation of how you came to do what you do, because you have a really interesting background in terms of the technology companies that you've worked with before, and to see all of that sophistication that you would have gleaned in those roles with those cutting edge companies come into play in the health sphere is just amazing. And so I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about how that journey unfolded, even before the Google. I mean, the academics, I think I'm particularly interested in as well. So anything you'd like to share on your origin story, I'd very much appreciate it.
For sure. I never planned to end here, honestly. My journey started as a scientist. Really, I was fascinated with this idea that we can teach machines to learn. And furthermore, at that time when I was, just finishing my graduation, degree in electrical engineering and computer science, I was really fascinated by the notion that we can actually learn in a different way, similar to how our brains learn from infinite data streams. And that got me to go deeper into this topic and pursue master's and PhD, because deeply and intuitively I knew that that's where the world will end someday, and we will have to have a different approach to learning that is not that traditional old way of like stop, learn something, tune machines, and then relearn again from the scratch. What if we can actually start teaching them to forget things and to look at things as dynamic relationships that have to be relearned, in fact, just how we as humans learn? And that passion sort of got me into that space, into, digging deeper. And ultimately, Google invited me, to join them as well, and got me to the Silicon Valley. But when I think of machine learning, it for me, I never cared about applying it to just any problem. It really mattered what kind of problems we're solving with this technology. I've always wanted to solve things that hopefully can give us progress in society in some way. And so at Google, for example, I was working on energy preserving approaches to mining big data sets, with this notion of like, what if we learn from a data stream instead of like, learning it all and relearning and rereading and rereading it? That takes a lot of computation and energy. So I was trying to find a way how we can make it cheaper. And at Reddit, I was helping them, do user safety in real time and better protect people from attacks, from abuse, from this kind of negative behaviors. And then at change.org, I was also working on how can we increase the diversity of the political voice and opinions in an automated way, such that we will give everyone a chance to support the initiatives that they care to support. So while I was going from different companies, I was really like, trying to find applications that will make a difference. Even in my last work in the blockchain space, we were really trying to detect in real time spam and scams that were hitting the people's wallets, and allow more safer use of this technology for the builders who are creating a new vision for the world, for how it can function. So it was my personal health struggle that actually at the end got me to start looking into the human body as well, and into the challenges and the complex problems that we're facing there. I got to a place where I felt like my health had changed, and it was moving in a direction that was, that was making me feel scared. And I tried to talk to doctors and get them to look into my data. I've always been nerdy. I've been using different devices, sensors, gadgets that will give me more information about my body. And I was trying to make them look at my data and see if they're seeing something that might be showing that I have a risk that my health is maybe going in towards, at that time specifically, diabetes. I was worried I'm pre-diabetic, and they just kept dismissing me and telling me that it's, everything is fine, and I couldn't get specialists to look at it at all. And this was happening across continents, not only here in the US, but actually in Europe as well. So I found myself alone and felt like, I have to do something about it. Like I can't let it go. And decided to take the scientific approach to the problem and simply, look into the science of what we have, look with curiosity, look into the existing research and collect data. And that's exactly how I started on this journey. I created like a set of biomarkers that I wanted to test for myself, and I convinced my doctor to order these biomarkers every 3 months for me. And then in the meantime, I was just trying to test different hypotheses that I had found in this research, in the books and literature by other doctors and researchers, and just see what will change. And by just simply monitoring those changes, I was able to actually reverse my prediabetes and get to a healthier, state of being, and also just learn a lot about my body. And that was just the beginning of it all. As over time, as we're getting more and more deeply involved with this research and this biomarker testing that was continuously happening over this, same cadence every 3 months, I started to expand this set of biomarkers and started discovering even more things, that there are actually relationships between them, that I, actually was struggling as well with hypothyroidism. So my thyroid was not functioning, and no one cared to look that deep. While we
Really?
did test, a few biomarkers here and there, they weren't enough to really see that this is happening. And I didn't know at that time that the thyroid could be affecting my metabolism, and my insulin resistance could be connected to all of that, actually. And so when I discovered it for the first time, I was shocked. And again, tried to talk to a few doctors and felt a lot of resistance, and then decided to just go ahead and simply, expand our, view of what if metabolic health is actually so deeply connected to all our hormone health, the thyroid health, our immunity and everything, that we cannot look at it in isolation. We have to look at everything together, and furthermore look into the genes and how they're actually affecting these things as well. Because nothing happens over time. These diseases, manifest over multiple decades, over multiple years. Small predispositions that are unmanaged slowly cause, deterioration and accumulation of problems that over time, the body cannot forever continue sort of compensating for these issues, for these deficiencies, and they start, causing problems. So that approach had led me to really develop this novel way of decoding the algorithms for decoding the human body and biology, and how we can actually analyze and prevent disease sooner before it becomes a disease.
And, I really have to say a comment on hearing you say, teach machines to learn. It was so much, and of course, you did say machine learning later, but just when you said the words that way, like to me, it kind of hinted that there is an art form to this, insofar as I don't know if I'm going to be using the right vernacular here, and I'm biased right now because I'm thinking about teaching my daughter to learn, right? Like different pedagogies, right? Different styles of education. But I think there is some version of that, right? When you are, maybe it's not so much on empathy today, but more on effectiveness and efficiency, but there is something to that. And I think everybody they have more exposure to that now than they might otherwise think, or certainly would have just even a few years prior. Because in a way, when you interface with your chat GPT, for example, or Gemini or whatever you use, you
Mhm.
can build your own GPTs, and it is learning based on your interactions. um,
Mhm.
you are in a way, you are not in a way, you are exactly teaching it how to learn, not just how to solve your problems, but the meta set of problems, right? Because these are all data sets that are then
Yep.
analyzed, right? So, first of all, just you saying it that way just kind of like turned on this light of like, oh, I should remember to think about this more, more deeply. And because my first exposure to machine learning was really more in my kind of PhD, my graduate school days, right? Like, so implementing phylogenetic analyses. So like if you want to compare multiple protein sequences, for example, the amino acids, they have information in them, right? And as it relate, the relative information that actually goes into like the relationships that you're talking about. So an amino acid change, say, for example, of the introduction of phenylalanine side chain, where there was a glycine previously, causes a major perturbation in tertiary structure of the protein, as an example. And so you can measure that as a profound, significant event and change, and then you can start to cluster groups ancestrally, based on changes there, or at least infer ancestry. And then there's like potentially millions of those changes in a single alignment that you're looking at, and then you're basically doing the calculations, and you're weighting how to put the tree together in the best possible way to show the best picture of truth, the evolutionary origin of these relationships over time. And that's a very expensive process. It takes a lot of time, and so you're always looking at ways, how do I make this more effective and this more efficient? Like a quick and dirty cheap tree would be like a neighbor joining type of model, versus a more complex one would be like a Bayesian type of model or maximum likelihood model, right? And so there's whole fields of bioinformaticians just dedicated to getting better effectiveness out of the algorithm so you can get to the answer faster and more robust. And it really matters because you're essentially potentially discerning between a pathogenic and a non-pathogenic
Mhm.
organism, for example. And then as it relates to, human health, that's where the genome sequence analysis comes from, clustering based on an intake form and how I report my ethnicity is a very different information source compared to considering the whole cosmopolitan nature of my genome, right? Because I don't know where I'm from. Where I say I'm from versus where my genome says I'm from, two different things. Like I told you, I'm from Canada. My genome says I'm a mutt. I'm like from everywhere, right?
Mhm.
And when I know that information, I change the way I think. So sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but just again, because you said teach machines to learn, it just opened up a whole level of empathy. And then coming into relationships. So like we are in relationship with these machines now. And I understand that what you're talking about is layers and layers and layers of sophistication beyond my day-to-day interaction with chat, for example. But it is interesting to pause there because you bring an extra container of context as it relates to women's health, right? Because just some people might be tempted to say, well, why don't I just load up all my data into chat and just ask it for the answers? It's like, well, first of all, there's some privacy issues there. But second of all, there is a contextual frame that is not trivial. And I think that's what you're pointing at is like you solve your own problem and then you're thinking, what other people have this problem? And then what other women like me have this problem? And then what other women generally have similar problems? And then you're kind of expanding out. And I think that's the iteration that you're talking about on the dynamic research, right? And so I'm really interested. So this is what's setting the question here is how did you go from N of one, which was you, probably a very beautiful model for you. And then how do you first, you're probably going to scale it out to be like, okay, this is going to encompass more people, 10 people, 100 people, 10,000 people, but it's
Mhm.
still going to have an N of one feel. And I love like your background on this specifically because I am imagining a universe where there is got a simple answer waiting, but it's on the far side of complexity, right? So I'm interested in how your journey has transformed it when it's just you to now thinking, well, you're probably going to be serving millions of people. So how do you scale
Mhm.
precision, predictive, personalization?
Mhm. Well, because it's guided by our data, unique data, right? And so if you approach the same reasoning methodology, I mean, my discovery taught me how to develop the reasoning model for this. Basically, it was okay. So we have to start looking at these biomarkers not in isolation to begin with. So far, most of the time, doctors look at things in isolation. They'll check your TSH, and if it's within normal ranges, they're like, okay, nothing looks too bad, but they don't look at the interplay between your TSH and the rest of the, let's say, low vitamin D, low iron, or even sex hormones. And so when you look at the interplay of things together, you start to be able to basically see how you could identify what is the specific problem that this human has, specifically if you even add the genes. In my case, for example, I have DIO1, DIO2 variants that reduce the enzyme activity of my thyroid for converting T4 into T3 hormones. So as a result, I'm a little bit more sensitive and vulnerable to, let's say, stress or nutrient deficiencies. When they're depleted, my thyroid doesn't convert as well, and hence how I got my, hypothyroidism or conversion issue, which wasn't visible through my TSH.
Right.
And so I realized that, okay, we have to look at the pattern. And that pattern actually describes the relationships between these, organs, between these systems in the body that are always connected, and one thing affects the other. There are bidirectional and probably like, relationships between each organ, and they're all, kind of collaborating together to solve your current, problems. So when one thing is off balance, it will affect the rest of the things. And when that pattern continues for a very long time, it continues to expand. And so multiple things will be affected. And that's how we look at these, biomarkers that reveal what are all the things in play and what specifically for this person is the biggest problem. So that led us to develop a sort of a systems biology approach to analyzing our biomarkers, and also using the information of how the existing genetic predispositions that you may have for certain reduced enzyme activity or reduced, let's say, secretion of insulin, etc., may be contributing further to your problem, or like, bringing another piece of evidence that can help guide us, guide the doctor, guide us, that we should get further testing to dig deeper into that direction instead of the other directions. And in some way, it's really designed to prioritize your problems and the places where you should be looking into to gain more insight on your health. So it becomes a framework for thinking and analyzing and reasoning, basically, that can be applied on top of any data set, and as a result, it produces a unique approach for each human being. And then the experiment of one thing continues, right? Because you need to go into that unique direction specifically for you, created, and get more data, and then try new things and get more data, and continue adjusting and seeing how your dynamic system also responds to that, and what unique adjustments need to be done each time of the testing, that will really get you yourself to the best possible, health fastest compared to anyone else.
Mhm. Yeah, right. Because I mean, the kind of habits that we're talking about, it isn't just, eat your vegetable and do your exercise, which of course you still have to do. But, you know, I had a conversation with somebody who's so folks at Longevity AI actually, and one of the things we talked about was the Tinder of habits. Pardon the analogy, but it's like, how do you do the best match, right, of habits? Because the best health habits that you're going to do are going to be the best health habits are the ones you actually do, right? So it's like, it's one thing to know all of your precision insights, but are you going to actually implement them?
Mhm.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, you know, when you describe what you're talking about, it's like, well, no, the fatigue that you're feeling is not made up. It's, there's this thing called the thyroid, right? And there's this
Mhm.
thing
Mhm.
called blood sugar, and that affects energy. And no, actually, you're not crazy. And um, two people on the same diet can have radically different results. We know this is
Yep.
true for pharmacogenetics as well. And yeah, just the idea of having this in your pocket in a way that you can develop a relationship with it, with the multiple data sites or data inputs, which biomarkers are great, obviously, but even every visit that you have with clinicians, practitioners, even conversations that you're having with your family, I would suspect that voice and conversation and reporting of symptoms in and of itself is kind of a potentially a smoking gun, right? And so is there that aspect of it? Like, would you consider integrating, like dialogue and text, whether it's from consultations or voice memos?
Mhm.
Is there that kind of an input that you've thought about?
At the moment, we are just sort of allowing a very simple intake, sort of answer a number of questions that
Okay.
ask
Yeah.
about our overall experience in health and any symptoms that
Yeah.
you may like came up that you're experiencing at the moment. We try to ask people how they feel, even emotionally, and how their
Right.
workouts, how are they sleeping, and
Yeah.
anything that has changed. We take that information into account because all of those are clues that can help us identify what may be going on, even with incomplete data. Because that's kind of like the problem that I experience when they ran some biomarkers and they told me your thyroid looks healthy, but at that time my thyroid was not healthy because that TSH level that looked normal, as you said, like it may be normal for one person and it might be hiding low free T3 levels for another person because of whatever else is going on in their body. And in my case, like just anemias, a lot of iron anemia, vitamin D deficiency, selenium as well. I had a bunch of things going on that were
Yeah.
explaining that I may have a different explanation for my fatigue, for the fact that I couldn't lose weight no matter what. I mean, I was feeling cold feet and hands most of my life, and I thought
Mhm.
this is genetics. We were like, "Oh yeah, your mom was also like that.
Mhm.
You are kind of the same." And now I'm thinking, "Oh, but my mom might have had a thyroid issue as well." And now
Mhm.
that I
Yeah.
take hormone, I feel
Yeah.
amazing. not feeling cold anymore. It's gone. So we take any clue possible, and we are definitely thinking of introducing some sort of a dialogue and interaction with the AI, where more input will be taken to further, refine those, insights and recommendations. But at this point, every time you do testing, we do another intake. So we take new information and use that to, again, re-rank everything and see what is now at the top of your problems.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. The reason that I ask is I was talking to a colleague of mine who's, I mean, his expertise is storytelling, and one of the things that he learned was, I can't remember which one, but he was attending a rare disease conference, and one of the things that came up, it was like, kind of, it was a conference held to connect patients, advocates, health practitioners, and researchers, and one of the things that came up in dialogue was that, there was one family that had a lesser degree of one of the symptoms, say it was fatigue. And what they stumbled upon is when they were kids, they both took Flintstone vitamins, right? And like, so how does that come up, right? And so anyway, then you can kind of trace that and infer that, well, there's something there in terms of the multivitamin, the B vitamin, and B12 specifically. But that's not going to work for everybody. But the point was, it was, in dialogue and in conversation with people who are on the frontier trying to solve the problems now, very much like yourself, that don't necessarily have the technical expertise. I think there's all kinds of new ways that we can kind of capture, um, observational, seemingly qualitative data initially, but well, from your experience at Google and Reddit, you can quantify that, right? So there is a way to take those conversations and look for the objective measures that are in there vis-a-vis Flintstone vitamins. And so and then hearing what you said about the data, increases and the context gets better as more and more people contribute.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so that's really exciting. And I'm interested to, to understand what your roadmap looks like, because I think you've been working on this for a few years. It feels like you've got your protocol, or at least strategy, in place. What does it look like for beta testers, and your launch plan? Can you say when that might be, or are you still in development? I mean, how is Diadia looking in terms of roadmap, to the extent that you can share?
Yeah, so currently we have it available for beta testing, and it's working
Okay.
quite
Yeah.
well. And we've collected quite some data. We basically, when you were saying, like the things that ChatGPT doesn't know is the things that do exist in the real world but have never been measured. Such as the fact that
Yeah.
75% of women with normal TSH levels have low free T3 levels. That came to us, was like so mind blowing. And then we found these
Wow.
other connections with the vitamin deficiency that I described that are mechanistically explained and possible, but they do exist in data as well. And so we've been collecting and enhancing our data set, and have been, refining our ranking, basically reasoning model, to kind of catch all of those kind of little edges around which it's really helpful for women's problems specifically to get that next level, has level of accuracy. And so we're in a few months away from releasing it together with our, the newest approach to getting the best of the functional medicine knowledge on these problems being included into the AI reasoning and the analysis that it's doing. So we have partnered with a number of experts, functional medicine doctors, one of the most brilliant minds in the space, to guide and teach the AI how to learn, right, about areas that are only captured and exist in their lived experience, in the practices that they've had with patients, with women whose data otherwise doesn't exist. And with that approach, we believe we can marry the best of the two worlds of technology and human knowledge and intuition, where having this technology like that paired, I think we can get to the furthest distance and discovering what truly is possible for women's health and prevention. What are the true, real, optimal ranges that we should be shooting for, and if we want to ensure the highest quality of life and extension for everyone, regardless of their genetic predisposition. Because we know some people have amazing genes and they can do whatever they want and still live long and healthy. But some people are not like that, unfortunately. We do have
Mhm.
some. positions, and we need to manage those things. I think that's what's been lacking in the world of genetics, where we're kind of like, we have there are a bunch of problems, but they're not prioritized. And if we do prioritize them by looking at what is not managed today, which is visible in your biomarkers, right, and in your symptoms, we can actually ensure that you reduce that inflammation, you get your hormones in the right place, you improve your metabolism, your energy, and those are the foundations for health, right? That's why
Hmm.
we try to eat well, and we try to sleep well, and we exercise well to reduce inflammation, to increase our energetic, efficiency, and to ensure that the body heals itself and recovers itself well at night. But those things
Hmm.
can be actually managed and accomplished through proper optimizations, like very targeted, precise optimizations based on your specific needs at that moment. And if you continue to do them over a very long period of time, I believe that will give us the best path for, like, a high quality life in our, like,
Hmm.
last, all of our life, hopefully, but in the last decades, as well as extension.
Hmm. The women that have signed up so far, what what is unique about them? Like, is there like a customer profile that's emerging? I mean, I guess how are you engaged? How are they finding you, or are you reaching out proactively? So is there, because the early adopters is always a certain type.
Yeah.
Can you define them, or is it too soon to say?
Yeah, definitely there is a type. There's women
Okay.
who, I think women have this intuition when something is wrong, and they can feel their body speaking to them, and they know that they should be paying attention to it. And so women who are connected to their intuition, they decide to dig deeper into their health. They take ownership. They go and start research and try to be informed and learn more, and do not listen to the dismissive opinions of doctors when they go and complain to them, and they don't really like want to dig deeper and help them out. They come to us and they see this technology as a tool that is giving them that really more confident, deeper understanding of their body and their health, and how they can, on their own, pretty much, try new things and see if they can actually feel better, or find the evidence they needed to speak to doctors and demand the testing and the care that they actually need. That's the kind of profile. They're very engaged, they're curious, oftentimes data oriented, I want to say, intelligent. They like to solve their body puzzle, I want to say, just how
Mhm.
I wasn't prepared to accept that this
Mhm.
is this is what it is that we are going to get.
Mhm.
And they're unafraid, I think, to experiment and
Mhm.
engage with their health.
Mhm. Yeah, the person that you just described close to me would be my wife, Kristen, who, I mean, she was her father's health advocate when he was diagnosed with blood cancer. And, she became a holistic nutritionist as a result, and was always looking for alternative paths outside of conventional medicine. And I'm not taking a shot at conventional medicine. Conventional medicine has its uses, but, she learned some things from that process. And, you know, the medical process, just like any process, is subject to vulnerabilities and is imperfect. And I think as soon as we treating it as perfect, we run into problems. And, obviously the consequences are people's lives. And so I think that was a very important learning for her. And I've, certainly benefited from her learnings where, as educated as I am in molecular biology, biochemistry, it's kind of hard to be your own advocate and, examiner. I mean, you've clearly done a great job. I think I did a good job as it related to like sport and human performance. And so I knew how to recover faster. I knew how to manage pain. I knew how to do more, but like my goal was off, it was like more, more, more until I like broke. And then she kind of helped me like pick up the pieces. She's like, hey, and we went through this whole, odyssey of things, genetics, bloods. And like for me, it actually turned out to be, an environmental issue that I would have picked up during my days as a tenant to slum landlords in university where there was mold everywhere that I didn't know. And so anyway, just, she helped me, and Kristen helped me get in front of like a naturopathic doctor or this mold test. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's the thing related to the cognitive fog and the tiredness and the pain that I was, I think, probably managing for decades because I knew how to recover as an athlete. So it's like, oh, I know how to recover more generally than the next person. And so I look
Yeah.
like I move well and I look like I'm not in pain, but actually compared to like what it feels like for me to feel good is like I'm in a ton of pain and my focus is terrible. It's like I'll do all these things to get my day started, but then by 11 o'clock I'm like hitting a wall. So anyway, so it was through, not only my biomarkers that we found that, because there wasn't valuable data as it related to various metabolic inflammatory pathways, histamine pathways, MTHFR, et cetera. Those were all informative as well for the nutritional intervention. But at the end of the day, there was a detox that was needed. And these aren't things that you get to without doing a deeper dive. And I guess, my question to you is, like, I don't think that people like your customers, people like my wife, are in the majority. I think they're in the minority. I think most people will, decide to live with the pain or think this is what aging is. So how do you walk the balance as you start to think about talking about your solution? How do you walk the balance of saying, hey, this, what you're feeling is real and it could be better. It's gonna be hard work to figure out. I'm gonna work hard to make it easier. Um, versus, like being and I'm pointing at myself, not others, like the hypochondriacs are real. I'm a version of that. You know what I mean? Like when I was sprinting, like kind of a reverse version where like I would know based on the temperature and the way the wind was blowing if had a high likelihood of pulling my hamstring. You know what I mean? Because I knew what it felt like to hurt myself, and I knew what the conditions felt like to cause that again, and so I was hypersensitive. How do we like walk the balance between, I guess, empowerment versus fear? Um, and is there a room? Well, I think you've already answered this. Is there a room for a new kind of expert to help guide the way? And I think that's what you were talking about with your advisor. So yeah. So how is that going?
So the question between not overdoing it, you mean? And
Well, creating a new framework where it's an exhaustive sample set of inquiry and unending questions, but like how do you guide me through it, right? Because I don't have my PhD in artificial intelligence, and I'm going to tap out before you do. So how do you make technology an enabler, and then does it make sense to connect it to a human at some point? And then at what point do you not need the human? Because my thinking is with the human's like, okay, what you're feeling is real, but what you're thinking is wrong. So I'm going to show you over here where what the actual science says, what the data says, and I'm going to help you reorient, because there's got to be, I think, a way for, like, this is why I go to experts, because I can't see myself, you know. So I want to see how the data sees me, but I also want to, connect with a human, especially if I'm emotionally compromised. So how do you see that playing out?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so I think that the AI is explaining everything how it's really connected, where it's using scientific
Yeah.
guidance and science, and so we remove any claims that are not scientifically correct, or at least plausible, which means they're proven mechanistic pathways in the science as well, published research that explains how this actually may work and be true. So first and most of all, we protect users from this kind of like analysis and recommendations that may be and too, let's say, too far away from what real is. And so in that way, if you do have a problem, you can see it. It can connect all of the pieces between things. Like if you, for example, your mold thing would have been very visible in a number of biomarkers, even on a simple, panel.
Mm,
When you connect the things together, it's kind of visible, and you would have been able to much sooner detect your problem than actually with
mm,
your wife to kind of like see it. But
mm,
those who like may be prone to overdoing, again, the AI is looking at things from a hierarchical point of view. It's not focusing on small details. For example, you may have one or few biomarkers that are sort of like not in optimal range, but AI is not looking at that problem. It's looking at what are the higher level issues in the body that have so many downstream effects to all sorts of other systems that are out of balance that you need to be paying attention to. And if there aren't any, the analysis is not going to come up and say that you have an issue.
Right.
But
Right.
there are issues like you just said, which often actually come from trauma. So there are people who are dealing with immunity issues, mast cell activation, or a heightened immune response, histamine reactions, etc., which are actually caused by a traumatic traumatic event in their past. And well, there are doctors, for example, experts who are reviewing the reports often would notice and say, yes, all of these things could be plausible, but very more likely it's also plausible that they actually had some trauma. And the real solution here is, yes, you can support the system with various, supplements and even medication, but they have to work on that trauma to reduce that immune response, to actually bring the system back to a healthier place. And that's why we have the human experts to just bring in an additional level of understanding of the connectedness between everything, and that data point of that someone had a traumatic event. I think we're gonna collect it over time, but because AI is in training, there is a lot that we don't know about the human body, and that's where we think that human intuition and knowledge can help to cover in those gaps where there is not enough data collected. And especially when it comes to women, for example, there's not enough research collected. Our hormones are super important and actually, impact everything in our bodies, including our immunity. And this has been so poorly understood. As a result, 80% of autoimmune cases in the US are actually women, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is that data that is missing, and we're collecting it. We're trying to create that best data set on the combination of little cues and symptoms and evidence from from social life, from trauma, from your emotional well-being, together with the biomarkers and your genetics to finally kind of connect the dots across everything.
Amazing. Now, in terms of the interface, what do you imagine? Like, do you imagine it like kind of a chatbot? Do you imagine it to be like a companion voice? Like how do you imagine the interface, or have you thought that far along?
At the moment, they're pretty much like sort of, reports on your health assessments.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
describe what is being discovered. They describe the evidence. They connect the dots between the symptoms that are experienced and how this is potentially being caused by what, and the interplay between things. And so then there's a list of recommendations. So in essence, similar to how you would imagine a session with a doctor would look like. It's just that it's like transcribed, handwritten for you. So basically, the doctor meets with you and they say, we discovered this, and there is this connection between your thyroid and your hormones, and this is how things are basically affected. So we have to fix this first in order for this to get better. It's pretty much in that way described what is being discovered and how things are interconnected, the evidence, genetic evidence, biomarker evidence, and then the recommended action steps that are most likely to help you moving in the right direction, or additional testing that you need to be doing. That's how it works right now. It's live, and it is basically like being used by a lot of people that way. I think in the future we do want to create a more of an interactive experience where there could be, oh, actually, I do have questions more about this, or maybe I've tried this in the past and it didn't work, or this might not be appropriate for me, for my body, because I know that I have a reaction, or maybe some data was missing. So ways for people to engage with it, but not quite a chatbot. Like that's not the way that we think this is gonna best serve people. Simply because it's think of it like you gave me a bunch of clues, so now I have to like take all of that into account together with the previous evidence and reanalyze everything so I can
Yeah,
come up with the best recommendation.
got it. Okay. The name, Diadia, how did you come to that?
We wanted something simple to remember that is very much connected to the core principle for how we think we can help people improve their health day by day, through engaging, with small steps with your health is how you can become healthier. Day by day, healthier is our motto.
And that's what DID points to, day by day.
Diadia, yes, day, like in Spanish, day.
Got it.
Diadia.
Yeah. And what's the Spanish infusion? Is that one of the co-founders, or you just like the
No,
ring of it?
that was just like a nice ring, yes. Also, associates with positivity, with sunshine, with sun, which is nourishing. Our brand is very much about compassion and nourishment in emerging technology, but not in a cold way, but in an empathetic way. And so our AI, our reports, they very much empathize with users and they make them feel seen. And when people read their insights, they just finally, feel like, yeah, I was not crazy. This makes total sense. Real, it wasn't in my head. It's something that women so often experience. I don't know if it happens for men as well, but I can say that for women, for sure, we feel a lot misunderstood because everything is kind of like blamed to, well, it's your hormones or perimenopause, menopause thing, or, you're being emotional.
Yeah, I was at a conference in North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, Dysautonomia International. That's where I'd mentioned there were patients and advocates and clinicians and researchers all there kind of just listening. It really was a beautiful thing. And, you mentioned, the overrepresentation of women in autoimmune disorders and dysautonomia. It's predominantly women. So, it includes things like, POTS and EDS. I met some people there with MS. And yeah, so it really was, as much as everybody who was there was suffering, the energy at the conference was, quite constructive, because at the end of it, the people there were feeling heard, and they were actually getting to talk to the experts, right? And again, feeling heard, and driving this kind of citizen scientist type of movement. And I think, infrastructure like yours empowers such an initiative. And so do you imagine like a citizen scientist component? Do you imagine like partnering with research institutions like universities or industry that's on the roadmap? Do you have any partners yet that you can share?
We don't have any partners like that, but we're definitely very interested in research collaborations. We believe the problem that we're solving, the connection of everything, and plus the involvement of genes is a big problem. And our mission and our goal is very ambitious. We really want to create the best data set out there for women that can help them understand what they should be shooting for. What are your personal optimal ranges? Not someone else's targets, but what is for you the best target that you should know. Because if you don't have the right target, then you're shooting at in the black, not at nothing. You don't know if that's what's gonna get you where you should be. That's why I think this concept of standard lab ranges is just so damaging right now to our health, because we rely on it so much. The doctors, would never take the general guidelines that exist are all based on these standard lab ranges that represent the status quo of a potentially very unhealthy population, which we know it is because American health has been declining over the past 2 decades. So if those are our targets, where are we headed? I don't think it's towards better health, in fact, which is really sad because we have so much innovation and technology coming out. So I think our big mission is really to identify those targets for each person based on their genetic, on their unique history and pre-existing, basically, let's call it damage that has happened, so that they can actually most efficiently arrive at better health outcomes. And that challenge is big. And we want to be collaborating and we want to be pushing the field forward towards more innovation, towards better understanding of this full interplay of genes. Because we know, even genes, the way that they're being studied today, oftentimes, it's like a little bit too simplistic as well. They're looking at, let's say, polygenic risk scores are the best, right, the most useful concepts at the moment that are being used. They can predict certain diseases, but they're still like basically modeling a group of genes and predicting just one outcome and not looking at the interaction between everything else, what is happening there. it's so simplistic. And I think that's where AI technology is really powerful, because it enables us to do these combinations of connections between multiple inputs and outputs. So if I'm targeting towards a better health combination of targets, then I
Hmm.
can identify what gene interactions would lead me there. You know,
Got it. Right. Okay.
there's a lot of
So
science to be.
yeah, no doubt. It's the beginning of your journey with the idea, and it's a day in and day out pursuit, but like in the right direction and toward the light. So that's really exciting. So you are live now, and do you have anything special planned, like any special launches on the horizon that we should talk about?
Yeah, so we will be launching very soon this new experience of basically our AI technology being used together with our most brilliant functional minds in the space.
Hmm.
That is coming out soon, in a few months maximum, sort of a timeline. And we are, in essence, inviting any doctor who is working at the edge of this field to come join us, to work with us. We have some already really amazing names like Dr. Anne Shippey, Amy Horneman, Jess Petros, Daniel Stickler, and many others who are, working with the technology. And we would love to make this available as an experience to anyone who is interested in, taking ownership of their health and aiming for something way better than what we currently have
Hmm.
in healthcare.
Amazing. It's funny. I just, yeah, Dan Stickler. He was one of my guests previously. So no,
Yeah,
that's great. But
he's a systems biology pioneer. He's our first medical advisor, in fact, and so he's been wonderful in guiding us in this approach as well.
amazing. So I said at the beginning of the call that I was going to ask you three questions. And so, true to my word, those three questions were: number one, if this was your last podcast, what's the key thing that you would want to communicate? That's number one. Number two is who needs to hear it? Who needs to hear it most? That's number two. And then number three is who would you nominate as my next guest?
Okay, if this was my last day, huh?
Last
um,
podcast, not necessarily last day. Yeah. Yeah.
I really think that my message is that we all must take ownership of our health. You know,
Mhm.
we also, I would say that both patients, both, the patient side, and also the clinicians who find themselves kind of in a sort of locked situation in the current system,
Mhm.
all have to engage a little differently with health and what is possible for the patients. I really think that we cannot continue accepting the standard lab ranges, which are being used as guidelines for preventing disease, because they are not at all useful. There are way more accurate, more dynamic ways for, helping us understand what our unique biology needs than the standard ranges. And there are many, many studies that have been shown already that these are not optimal ranges, not for men, not for women. So I would say, ask better questions, learn more, demand more from your care practitioners. Don't accept the status quo. That's
Mhm.
my message to everyone, whether that's going to be technology like ours or someone else's. Do more
Mhm.
testing. Or we have a number of companies pioneering more testing and more affordable, right?
Mhm.
Diagnostics. I think, but you're not gonna experience that if you don't engage, if you don't like
Mhm.
go and look for solutions. And even, let's say, these are some of those that are expensive things. So what can you do if you can't afford those things? I would say you can still ask for regular testing and as
Mhm.
comprehensive as possible, and just basically demand that your all of your systems, core systems, are evaluated: your thyroid, your sex hormones, your metabolic health, all of it, at least twice a year. And I would say I hope that I reach the women who are struggling with some complex hormonal, endocrine, immune issues, and they
Mhm.
haven't been able to find answers, who basically find themselves stuck in their health. I hope that they know that there are tools out there that can help them find answers, even on their own,
Mhm. Mhm.
and with them to actually be stronger advocates for themselves with their practitioners. And for the practitioners, I would say, like they should, I would say that they should definitely be more open to what AI technology can do for them as well, because it is a very powerful tool that I think it can only improve the quality of care and lessen the burden on them and empower them as well with more
Mhm.
knowledge, with the opinions and the learnings from the other experts who are working at that cutting edge. And together we can actually, instead of prevent the health of our society, prevent it from deteriorating and starting to like actually build healthier societies instead.
Mhm. Amazing. And who would you nominate as my next guest?
I think that someone that will be really a great guest for you would be Dr. Leo Grady. He is the founder of Diadia Health. They are actually sequencing the DNA of our gut and understanding. They've built an AI technology that basically tries to understand how the gut plays a role in every aspects of our health, how it is
Mm.
involved and in interacting with all of the other, systems in our body in a similar way how we're looking at the body as a complex system. They're looking at the relationships between our microbiome and the rest of the organs.
Amazing. Well, I will extend an invitation based on your recommendation. As far as our conversation today, Elena, I want to thank you so much for putting aside the time. I know how busy the startup founder's life is, and especially when you have so many exciting things moving all at once, and really just a few months away from a product launch. So I can't express enough how grateful I am that you would set this time aside and yeah, and get this powerful message out to those women that need to hear it most. And I'll certainly do my best to help spread this news. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Appreciate this so much, Jeremy. It was great. A lot of fun and a great talk.
Thank you. Today we learned from Elena. Well, she proved that your intuition is real and the data is there to back it up. What's now undeniable is that we must stop aiming for standard lab ranges, the status quo of a potentially very unhealthy population, and start targeting our individual optimal ranges. The power to reclaim your health, moving beyond isolated symptoms to embracing your whole dynamic system, is no longer a futuristic dream. You can now carry the truth of your body's complexity. And so, what will you do with this knowledge? The invitation is to take ownership of your health, become a citizen scientist, and demand a new conversation with your body.